Most underrated social media platform right now.
Reddit.
What will change about social media in the next 10 years?
The way in which the UI is structured.
What won't change about social media in the next 10 years?
That it will both be really helpful to connect people and also devastating in lots of ways culturally.
One social media trend you wish would disappear.
Brands feeling like they have to jump into the comment section of every viral post.
If movement strategy had a mascot, what would it be?
Tuna.
Why?
Because somebody smart that helped us with our branding designed a tuna for us, and it always stuck with me.
If you could take over one brand's social media for a day, which would be?
The White House.
If you had to describe your leadership style as a movie, what movie would it be?
The Godfather. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Dude, where's my car?
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
Today we have a very special guest, Aaron. We have Jason Mitchell. He's the CEO and co-founder of Movement. Used to be Movement Strategy, now Movement, which is a social-powered marketing agency that has grown from basically a scrappy team working out of a living room to an award-winning operation with around 150 marketing experts. But really what makes Jason's story fascinating is how he pivoted from life as a ski bum to becoming a pioneer in social media marketing before it was cool. There's a lot of puns in there. While his classmates were creating standard print ads and TV commercials for their senior project, Jason was already securing contracts with local businesses to manage their Facebook pages. This early insight propelled him to work with the Denver Nuggets, New York Knicks, and even the NBA itself. Now, Movement creates brand building campaigns for giants like Amazon, Nike, Netflix, and Warner Brothers. Jason attributes his success to maintaining that original curiosity, not just for what works, but for what's next. Today, he's an evangelist for what he calls social-powered marketing. It's a revolutionary idea that a company's entire marketing strategy should revolve around social media. But, Aaron, here's where it gets interesting. Jason's approach doesn't reject traditional media channels. Instead, it forces companies to use these conventional platforms in a far more creative and engaging ways. Jason also believes that companies need to let loose when it comes to creating social media and is a big advocate for social media managers, as he posts a lot about them on LinkedIn. But one motto that he says that really resonated with me is move fast and make things. I have a feeling that this is going to be a really interesting conversation, especially with you in the room, Aaron. Jason, we're thrilled to have you here and hear more about what you're doing right now with social media. So I have one question that I want to just kick things off with. There's something very interesting in the stuff that you talk about and the things that you say, especially when you talk about social. When you mean social, are you talking about organic social media?
Yeah, typically I think that organic social media is the most powerful form of mass media today. And so, of course, you can have paid ads on social and there's influencer and everything else. But generally speaking, what we're interested in is how do you get people to talk about your brand organically on social media? And so everything that we try to do as an agency is in support of that.
So what I heard in there, what sounds a little bit different, you didn't just say having the company post on their social media accounts on their own company accounts, right? What you just said, I think, is you want other people talking about the company. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction. I mean, people think organic social is like I have a company page and what am I posting? And that's only a small part of, how people are discovering your brand. Most of what people see and care about is not what did this brand post, it's what did this influencer say about your brand, or what did my friend or mom or whoever else say about it. And so it's important I think there's too much emphasis on owned social media pages, which can be really important, but there's not enough emphasis on what is the broader conversation and how do we as a brand influence that.
So is that what social powered means? Especially I'm really curious about this thing about the relationship with traditional media. So what do you mean by social powered? And in other areas where you say that a company's entire marketing department should be centralized around social media?
I think that social media is the most important way in which people learn about new products and trends and, make connections. And so then it should be at the center. It should power sort of everything else. So the way that we approach it is we have some philosophies. One is social from the start. And so, when you want to understand, what the opportunities are for your brand, it's, in our opinion, better to start by looking at social media. What are people saying in deep Reddit sub-communities about your category, your competitors, your company? How are people talking about your products online? Who are influencers that, care about it? And so, powered by social first comes from a place of using deep social media listening and understanding to contextualize what is happening that you can then as a brand influence. And then, when we think about not just driving the strategy, but actually putting out the creative, there's so much that is influenced culturally by, like, everything in culture is influenced by social. And so I think that today there has been an approach for a long time that was like, let's take what's on TV and put it on social. And people more and more know that doesn't make sense. I think we can now expand social offline. So for instance, I saw a really great billboard the other day, and it was clear that it was influenced by trends that they had seen on TikTok. And so I think that is an opportunity, is we see social power is to understand that social media is driving culture. And so everything that you do should tap into that, whether it's understanding what the culture is, understanding audience, or how you show up in the real world or on TV or anywhere else.
So I guess my question would be on that. I mean, it totally makes sense, I guess, on a theoretical level to me, and I'm sure there's a practical way to do it, which hopefully you'll explain to me. But if I think about it as a brand, if I were to come to your agency and say, I want you to help me do social better, right? I see how you'd be able to, take control of our social accounts and put out, the right type of content and all that. But the idea that you're describing here of being able to influence the things that other people are saying about you and what the influencers are saying about you, that almost sounds like PR to me, that you're finding that way to influence other people to be able to talk about you and spread that message beyond your owned accounts.
I think it's more than PR. It's the essence of what marketing is today, in my opinion. So, a brand could approach us and say, okay, we want you to help with our social. And they might say, we want to grow our TikTok. And say, okay, let's look online at what people are saying. And we might come back to them and say, hey, everyone is saying that your bathrooms are disgusting and it ruins the experience, because when they go to your store, your restaurant, whatever, they go to the bathroom, it's unpleasant. Like, unless we can fix that, it doesn't matter how great your TikTok is, right? So it's our job to help brands understand that the perception of their brand is the culmination of what everyone is saying on social media. And it's their job as the stewards of the brand to fix that. And it could be through, having a larger TikTok account or YouTube to attract people, but it could also be, that they are not seeing what people are saying. So for instance, sometimes we will come to our clients and say, hey, did you know you have this niche product that you never market, but there's like this Reddit page that's dedicated to that. Let's lean into that a little bit and let's create more products around it, or let's create a campaign around it and tap into that sort of audience affinity for that thing. And that can be really effective. So that's where it's like we see, because social is so critical to a company's success, we see our job as being more than what has traditionally been thought of as the role of social, but to really help them influence how people perceive their brand.
What I find so interesting about this is brands are built. No one goes to the best brands. They didn't go to a branding agency and say, this is, what's our brand before we went to the advertisement. Like the best brands were either built through like great product, great customer service, or great advertising, or all three. But in the past 10 or 15 years, with less people watching television, less people obviously being exposed to print ads, outdoor billboards, and with everything being shifted to, with all of the advertising budgets being shifted to, performance marketing, paid social, as you called it, there's been a real lack of brand building. It's very hard to name a brand that's been built, a new brand that's been built in the past 10 or 15 years. And I would say that Google and Facebook don't count because they're part of the ecosystem, right? I mean, a brand like Coca-Cola or whatever. I guess Liquid Death would be the newest, or Dollar Shave Club would be extreme examples of that. And with Dollar Shave Club using paid social, what I find really interesting is you're saying that it is entirely possible to build a brand on organic social.
Yeah, I do think that. I mean, I think when brands get larger, they start to have ability to invest media dollars. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy media. I think that media has a place, but I think that people are increasingly good at tuning out ads that they don't want to see. And so I think that the opportunity for paid media today is to amplify really great creative content. So that's more what I'm saying. And then there are brands, I mean, there are influencers that are launching brands that are becoming really large, and they're doing that entirely on the back of organic social. So, and platforms they built for themselves. So yeah, I think that the landscape is just changing so much.
But it would seem like too, it would be exhausting, right? Because when you did this with paid media, say like on television, you had a commercial, and the goal was, more or less the same, to get people, if people were talking about it, if people were going around saying, I can't believe I ate the whole thing, try it, you'll like it. If they were joking, or the frogs, right, in the Super Bowl, if they were going around doing that, like, you had to win, right? There's some brand stuff going on here. But then you could take those commercials and just run them. Like, the work's done, you start working on the next commercial. But with social media, like, okay, organic social, you don't have those big media budgets, and you don't need that, but you need to just keep um to keep relevant. Like, you have to keep posting, you have to keep doing stuff every day. Doesn't it get like how does a brand do that? I guess they hire you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best, influencers are prolific, and you don't get to be the best at something by, taking it easy, right? Like,
Mhm.
you guys know that you have a startup. I certainly know that. I've been running a company for 16 years. It's exhausting, but if you want to win, that's what it takes. And, competing in business is like sport, like it is a battle every single day to gain market share. And so, yeah, I mean, you can't just create a piece of content, like phone it in, create a piece of content. I mean, it's incredibly competitive in every single industry that we operate. And so we have to be on our game, working hard, putting out high performing content, learning, iterating constantly to compete. And ultimately, I think the consumers win, because you have brands that are creating more and more interesting content, entertaining them, building connections with them, creating better content. I mean, I think that's to an extent what capitalism is all about, right? Is the best wins, whether it's media or product. So yeah, it's tiring, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
I guess I would be curious. I understand how on the individual influencer or creator side, there are people, like you said, who are just prolific, and they're the top of their game. They can create tons of great content. They could decide to lend their brand, their personal brands there, to a company if they want to endorse a product or something along those lines. But I guess the question becomes now on the company or the corporate side who's trying to build a brand. They're typically not going to have that type of prolific content creator in-house. It would seem to me that companies today would probably need to start turning into, I guess, content creation, like media companies first, in terms of marketing and being able to build a team, hire creators in-house, or is that something that can be effectively? I have a feeling I know your answer because you run an agency, but can that be something that could be effectively passed on to someone who's kind of, I guess, at an arm's length, a little bit away from the brand, to just become that content creation machine for them.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a fallacy around like the relationship between agencies and in-house. I mean, for us, the people that are on accounts, for the most part, they're dedicated on those accounts. So, they might be working on Amazon and they show up every single day working on Amazon. They collaborate every single day with our clients over there. Like they're not physically sitting next to those individuals in the offices, but, sometimes they are. So, I think that there's lots of ways to do it. You can build an amazing in-house team, and plenty of companies do that. You can have one AOR type agency that you have a really deep relationship with, and that can work. You can have a roster of agencies. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, and I've seen it successful, in lots of ways. I think the reality, though, is you need a really strong, hardworking team who understands your industry, understands social and culture, and is incredibly committed every single day to, doing this thing that is really hard, which is winning, in business, especially in these huge categories. It's challenging to do, but, fortunately, we are great at it. And so we have the opportunity to work with the biggest brands in the world to do it for them.
I think I want to ask this question, and I want to ask it two different ways, because with the whole brand building aspect of it, I'm curious, what does a brand do, competition wise, I guess, or what is a brand supposed to make out of the fact that somebody posting some stupid thing with zero intention of it necessarily going viral, right? And has a post that just, blows up and becomes, Haktua girl or, whatever it is, how do you explain that? And, and then at the same time, how do you explain, like, does that mean that now brands are not just competing, say, against other brands, but now they're also competing with the content? I guess they've always been competing with the content of whatever medium they're on, but you have Haktua girl who then just becomes a brand in and of itself with bad cryptocurrency stuff that she maybe went the wrong way with it. But then you have someone like Mr. Beast, right, who just comes out of nowhere and not only has his own brand, but starts, instead of like endorsing other products, just starts competing with them.
I think that it's about an understanding from the decision makers within the company what this new world is that we're living in and how to operate in it efficiently.
What is
And
that?
Efficiently, like
what is the new world? That's
so
what everybody wants to know. What's this new world that we're living in?
It's embracing the fact that you no longer control the message, that people control the message, and it's your job to try to steer that message to make it as big and as possible as positive as possible. So here's a great example. We were hired by this really large paint company, right? Think like painting your home. Like there's a couple brands, one of those brands, right? And they had somebody that worked at their company who in the back of the store was making these TikToks showing different paint stuff. And they went viral. And this employee, kind of blew up on social in a really positive way, talking about the paints. It was against company policy to do that. And they fired her. Wow. And that blew up in their face. People were really mad at them. And that's because they didn't understand at the highest levels, this new world that we operate in, that, you need to give the keys to employees and your fans and everyone else. And you need to recognize what is happening and amplify it in really positive ways. So they could have instead been like, okay, this is really interesting. One, we need to update our employee policy because this no longer jives with what is going to be successful for us. And two, we need to support this individual and have them stop working at the cash register and doing this on their breaks. We need to give her a studio and support her so she could do even more of this. And there are certain brands that are doing that and embracing it, and there's other brands that don't understand the shift. And they think that they are the only ones that can control the narrative of what their brand is, and they just don't get it. And so I think that is the shift that is happening. It has to happen in the the minds of the major decision makers of the company to then empower audiences, employees, their agency partners, internal marketing teams to do whatever it takes to get people to talk about their brand.
Is there I want to say a playbook, maybe? Like if there was, a smaller company or a medium-sized company, they're not big enough or ready to hire your agency yet, but they will when they get there. How would somebody start with doing what you're talking about? Because it totally resonates, it totally makes sense. But I could see where it's intimidating. People don't know what to create. People don't know how to do the social listening you were talking about before. Like, where would people start with this?
I think that it depends on the size that you're talking about, right? There's so many different size businesses. If you're a very small business, a solo entrepreneur, one or two people, I think you just need to own it. You need to just figure it out. You need to get in there every single day and start doing it. It's a part of the job. You want to be an entrepreneur, a business owner. Marketing is critical, and this is the new way to market. When you get a little bit bigger, I think it's still important for the owner operators to understand the space, to really kind of know it. And again, I think they need to take responsibility for that. I think that for a long time, and still to this day, to an extent, I think kind of small business owners try to outsource this piece. They don't understand it. They don't want to understand it. They hire this young girl from college, and they're doing it for it. It's like, that isn't going to work. They still need to understand it. But I do think you can hire people who, I think that you need to have some understanding of what works, and you need to be involved in the process. But then I think you can hire people who, understand the space. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands of, social media professionals that are freelancers that will love to work with your small business to help you do this stuff. So I think that at any stage you can find the right partner, whether it's internal, whether it's yourself, internal or external, to help navigate this world.
You did a post a while back on the Savannah Banana guy. Is that like a good example of what you're talking about?
Amazing. It's an amazing example. I mean, this is a guy who, I don't know everything about them, so I don't want to miscategorize, but seems to me needed to figure out how to, sell tickets to, minor league baseball, and realize that, started testing things out and realized that kind of being larger than life, over the top, funny, different things is what resonated on social, and then happened to be also what resonated in real life. And those two things really work together, and we're able to sort of use social and experiential experiences that inherently themselves lend themselves to social, because they're outrageous. And so you take out your phone and you record it, you post, and has built a really, truly amazing brand. So I think Savannah Banana, to your question, Justin, earlier about like what are new brands that have emerged over the last 10 years, that's an amazing example of a really strong brand, one that I think is going to only increase in awareness and value, that is very much, a social powered brand.
I think one of the things that was interesting, I remember in that video, was it was talking like about obviously what he did, but he was very keen on talking about the failures. I think there was he's like, yeah, we had 7-month pregnant women dancing during halftime to push it, and it flopped, and they had somebody else like flop and stuff like that. And I remember the crux of your post was about that as well. Like, you're going to fail when you do this.
Yeah. I mean, I look, brands need to take risks, and I get it. Big brands are more risk averse. The innovator's dilemma. It's not a great thing, but I get it. Small companies that are not willing to take risks, I don't get it. It's, but I think when it comes to social, what's really interesting is like people, and so you guys do personal branding, obviously. And I think oftentimes, I think it's very true for individuals, but oftentimes people are scared, whether it's a brand or a person, to post, because they're like, well, what if it flops? It's like, well, if it flops, nobody saw it. So who cares? It's only like when it doesn't flop that people are actually going to see it, and then you're having success. So I think that, going back to the Savannah Bananas, you gotta swing the bat a lot. And some of those will be home runs, some of them will singles, doubles, and some of them will be, misses, and that's okay. I think that one of the realities I believe that has changed in terms of a recipe for success today is that you just need a lot more swings at the bat today. When you look at some of the very prolific brands today, a great example I think is Elf Beauty. They are putting out campaigns constantly. The speed at which they're bringing really interesting stuff to market is almost like mind blowing. And then you look at some other brands or a more traditional approach, and it's like, let's do one thing a quarter, let's do a big thing a quarter. And because today you don't know what is going to hit and go viral on social and what isn't, and it really is a question of, you need to have a lot of at bats to have some things take off. So just the approach is very different. And so I think that's another thing that marketers today need to wrap their heads around is, it's not about necessarily putting out the perfect thing. It's about putting out a lot of high quality things, and some of it will hit.
I want to. Can you can you explain a little bit about how you got into this? So you were a ski bum. I think you were an extreme skier racer too. I mean, if it, and then you were taking marketing courses. Can you explain that story a little bit more?
Sure. So I come from a skiing family, a long line of skiing. In fact, my great uncle was in the ski regiment in World War II in Italy. So it's really in my family, and my dad taught me, and I'm now actually teaching my kids, which is really fun. But anyways, big skier growing up, and I went to the University of Colorado because I remember asking my parents, where can I, basically ski all the time? And they were like, Colorado. So gone into the University of Colorado, was a total like barely took classes my two first years. Then decided to move to Crested Butte and be truly a ski bum and compete in the Extreme Ski Championships. And that was an interesting moment in my life where I realized, like, okay, I want to go back to school with some renewed focus and energy. I want to figure out what I want to do. And one of the best schools at the time at the University of Colorado was the advertising program. So I applied to that and I got in, and I came back to school and I was studying advertising. And one of the things that I saw was that we were learning about, here's how you make a TV ad and here's how you do print. Meanwhile, this was, 2000, and just when I came back, it was 2008, 2009, and Facebook was, getting to be a little bit bigger. And we were all on, Reddit and Dig and Twitter. And that wasn't at all what they were talking about. It was such a traditional approach. And so I was like, I think there's a disconnect here between what we are learning about and the way that college kids, which is like the key demographic for so many brands, how we're actually consuming media. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity here. And so my best friend, ski buddy, Eric, and I decided to create one of the country's first social media agencies and work with local companies in Boulder and help them, see if social media can be an effective means to reach new customers.
So you're definitely not risk averse as an extreme skier, and and going and making those changes. But it brings up an interesting point. So, well, can you can you get a little bit more detailed about that story about? Okay, so you're in the class, and it. You talk about how while you were in school you were already doing this, and you started an agency while you were in marketing school, and you landed the Nuggets. And can you explain a little bit, not just the story but also the sort of mentality and difference that you saw was needed when
Yeah.
talking about these things?
So definitely. So I think that comes back to taking a year off of school and the mentality. And to anyone that's listening that's, in college or going to be in college, I highly recommend taking a year off while you're in college to sort of just get some real world experience and figure out what you're interested in. So I did that in Crested Butte, and I was a ski bum, but I was a server. I had to make a living for myself, and I recognized at that time that I wanted to be entrepreneurial and I wanted to make money, and I didn't want to live like a lot of ski bums live, which is actually a pretty tough existence, especially when you get older and you have kids and medical bills and all of that kind of stuff. So I went back to school with a renewed focus, and I was in the advertising program, and our senior, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to launch an agency. I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. This feels like an opportunity. And I think a difference in my mindset that was so vivid to me at the time was we had a senior class project for advertising. It was like a portfolio thing. And we were in groups of four people or whatever it was. And we had a real brand come in, and we had to put campaigns together for this brand. And the brand, I don't know if it still exists. I think it was called Brain Tonic. And it's like you drink it, and it has different things in it that that supposedly help you with sort of mental acuity and stuff like that. And all the other groups pitched like, here's this TV spot that we could do, and here's this like big idea. And I was like, hey, I made a Facebook page for you, and I made a Twitter account for you, and I am actually engaging with customers and creating real value. And if you want me to continue to do it, then you need to start paying me. And he was like, holy shit, that is amazing. And yes, I'm going to hire you to do that for me. And it was just like, we were so far apart, the people in my class and myself. Like, I was at that point, like hustling. I was like, I was like, this is a customer. I was like, I'm going to get this as a customer. Not like, oh, this is a hypothetical thing that I'm going to put in my book. And there was a difference between the type of work that they were thinking about and the type of work I was thinking about, and a difference in like, how real is this? And so I think that was a big difference. And from that point, I was like hustling in college. I was, so you talked about like the Denver Nuggets. I can get to that story. A better story was, I was flying from New York to LA, and I had just started this company, and I was sitting on the plane next to a guy who was flipping through a ski magazine, and I was a big skier, and I saw there was like advertising stuff in there. It was like a binder of stuff. And I struck up a conversation with him, and I learned that he was moving from New York to Boulder to be the publisher of Ski Magazine. And I was like, I started selling. I was like, holy shit, I have like 6 hours from New York to LA to land, an account. And so I was selling, and we won the business. And that guy actually was Mike Federle, who went on to run Forbes for a long time. As a amazing guy and good chance on us. And it was like that, I am an entrepreneur and I love social media, but I also like am selling constantly. One of our first clients was a guy I was playing golf with. He's like, tell me about a product. I'm like, great. Are you on social media? No, you're not. So the Denver Nuggets, we were one of the first social media agencies. And this was a time where companies were just starting to think about social. And we were getting leads because they were going to Google and they were typing in social media agency, Denver, Boulder, Colorado. And we were one, if not the only result to pop up. And so one of the companies that did that was this company, Quest Communications. And they were a large communications company, and they brought us in, and they were like, we're thinking about social media. We gave this whole pitch to them, and I mean, in hindsight, it probably wasn't that good, but at the time, I felt like it was amazing. And they got back to us and were like, hey, we don't think we're going to do social media, which is funny now, but that's a stance that a lot of companies had back then. They said, we sponsor the Denver Nuggets, and they should definitely be on social media. Do you want an introduction? And I don't think I could have said yes fast enough. And they introduced us, and we went to the Pepsi Center, which is what the arena used to be called. And we went there and basically had 5 minutes to pitch the CMO on why they should be on Facebook. And, I don't really remember what I said, but I do remember him getting up and saying, that was a great answer. We'll be in touch. And then, we basically traded a year of social media services for $5,000 plus season tickets. And that was one of our first big clients. But then we could go all around Colorado and say, we launched the Denver Nuggets on social media. And that gave us a lot of credibility. So, yeah, I
15
just,
years later, we're still talking about it. So it's pretty good.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think some of those founding stories are so instrumental in defining the culture, and as an entrepreneur, something that you just like I'll always remember some of those stories. They're so foundational to sort of who I am, and yeah, like my experiences.
So that's interesting. Like you said, foundational to who you are. Do you think that there is something in the way that you founded movement strategy, the sort of mentality that you need in order to have that kind of the thinking? How many people were in your class, if you remember?
There were probably 25 people in the class.
25. So 1 out of 25 people like just didn't think normally, right? That thought in this certain way and just sort of jumped on it and said, "Oh, let's build, let's do this," right? And I think that that's like pretty normal, right? In the world, it's the majority of people are gonna do what they know works and what's going on now. But what I think is kind of interesting here is how much of that attitude is also necessary to actually do social media.
That's an interesting question. I think that they're different things. Like, we have lots of people at the company who are truly amazing on social media, but have no interest in being entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's you have to be willing to take risks to do a good job on social, but the risk profile is I think totally different. Um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so I'm not sure that those two things are necessarily one to one. And yeah, I mean, there's just I think I'm a fairly good entrepreneur, but there's so many people at my agency that are so much better at social media marketing than I am.
Then
So
you are.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So that's an interesting thing. There's the business side, and then I'm a creative, and people always say, "Why don't you run your own agency?" And I said, "I tried, but I'm not a good business person." At the end of the day, I like to write and do the creative part, but and so I generally don't call myself an entrepreneur because that's what I have Aaron for. But the the what I guess I'm trying to get to is how much of this is talent,
How much of which piece?
social media, being good on social media.
I think that the thing that is so similar to entrepreneurship is perseverance. And I think that talent is something that can be grown over time. You listen to Mr. Beast talk about how he went from Jimmy to Mr. Beast. And it's not necessarily a story of this natural talent. It's a story of a kid who worked harder than everyone else to become the best YouTuber in the world. And so I think that it is about talent. And I think that people might say, "Oh, I'm not talented." It's like, no, you just are not, you don't have enough perseverance to do it. Maybe you don't have enough natural talent, but you certainly have the same hours in a day that everyone else has, and so you could get to be really good at it. So I think that most people, if they wanted to, could potentially be good, but certain people are more charismatic than others, right? Certain people are great writers, which lends itself to being good on social. Certain people are great in front of the camera or good at editing. So I think people come at it from different places, but I do think that perseverance is incredibly important to be great.
So I wanna move a little bit into like, if you don't mind, getting a little bit. I think people are kind of very interested in somewhat of like the mindset shift and also the philosophy that it takes to do what you guys do at Movement. So if someone's not going to hire you, which they should, or they can't yet, and they want to kind of do it, like one of the things that you said was, you know, you think that social media right now is one of is the most important medium, and that the way that audiences, it's radically changed the way that the audience interacts with a brand. So where exactly does the audience fit in? Are they participants, or are they merely like better segmented targets for your client's messages? Like how does that work exactly?
They're both. The it's a more dynamic and interesting relationship than how it was in the past, right? Where it was just like, we're putting out a message and you are reacting to that message. And hopefully you tell some friends. Today, there are such active participants and oftentimes themselves an even larger microphone to tell that brand story. So I think it goes back to what we were saying before, but um, yeah, I think that the brands that are doing it really well are the ones that are understanding that the audience themselves are the ones telling, the most important message. And so how do we get them engaged, and how do we get them to, share our story? And that's why, like there's it sort of got disrupted during the pandemic, but it's starting to rebuild. Like there's a big push towards experiences and experiential, because, that is in sort of obvious way that brands can get individuals to help push out their message. And so we're starting to see, malls being reshaped to be more experiential type things that people can come to, community can build, they can share it on social media. And so that's recognizing that people are showing up not just as consumers, hopefully they'll come and buy, but also as active participants. They can tell that brand story.
Before you mentioned, and I think it was Aaron was going there with it, and I wanted to return to it. It was how there's a lot of talk, right? Everybody kind of wants to know like what to say on social media. What do I do in order to get the attention? Like, what do I post? We just said interesting about like the malls, like how the malls are set up for like engagement. And it reminded me of a post that I saw that you posted recently about Costco, and how Costco has no social media, none whatsoever, but they're talked about on social media all the time. Is that like the ultimate goal?
Yeah. I mean, I think for most businesses to be like Costco is a pretty amazing goal. They're one of the most well-run, businesses
Well,
in the world.
I don't mean to be like Costco, but I just mean, you
Well,
know,
just
um,
to finish the thought, like I think it is to be like Costco, because Costco, I mean, ultimately it's such an amazing product, right? There's a reason that so many people love going to Costco. It's a great experience. You know that you're going to have high quality products at with for really great prices, and so that's why people love Costco. And so if people love Costco and they love the experience of going to Costco, they're going to share that. And so I think that at the end of the day, any business has a product, and I think that the product and that product experience is more important than any quote unquote marketing. But those two things today are more close together than they've ever been in the past. You have, so like, I don't know if you guys have ever had Din Tai Fung. It's like amazing uh, Chinese dim sum delivery, or there's restaurants and there's delivery. We always get it as delivery, and the packaging is amazing. And when it shows up, it's like perfect, and it's an awesome experience. And that lends itself to like people taking photos and sharing it, and getting more and more of it. And so those two things I think are just more interconnected than they've ever been before. The inverse of that is you get delivery and it shows up and it's a mess, and you take photos of that and then you post that, and that is then the brand story that gets told on social. So I just think that you really can't disconnect the experience you have with the product, with the brand, from quote unquote social, which is why I also say like social media should not be siloed in a department. You shouldn't have like, this is the social media team and they do social, and then this is the brand team and they do other things, and this is the product team. It's like, no, everyone needs to understand that social media is now the most important medium. And so everyone needs to be thinking about social with product, with any sort of brand marketing, with social, obviously.
that is a really interesting point. I mean, that you make from historically, when you, as you know, I study a lot the history of advertising, and throughout the history of advertising, there's been new mediums: print, newspaper, magazines, radio, television, And each time it wasn't like those things were siloed off. It was just, oh, okay, now we're going to make TV ads. Now we're going to make radio ads. This is the new thing. For some reason, when social came into the scene, or even digital or whatever, it got siloed off. Like all of a sudden there was advertising and there was digital. It's interesting because we had on the show recently Steve Harrison, who is the founder of Brand Response Advertising, and he was dealing with direct mail, and an old school ad guy. When he was talking, he was like, "Oh yes, when there was a recession, so the advertising people were looking for jobs, so I was able to hire them from my direct response agency." And I was like, "That's an interesting semantic difference that you said in your head there." And I think maybe that what happened is that, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, is that when social came, it was such a direct response medium that it immediately got siloed and put off to the side. It was like, okay, there's digital advertising, there's digital marketing, and then there's advertising.
Yeah,
Or
it's
my question is, why do you think that social media got segmented? It got segmented away.
I think that
What?
the people that were in charge didn't understand it and wanted to continue making TV ads. And they said, you know what? I don't know how to do it. There's not as much money here. We're going to give it to the interns. We're going to give it to the young kids. We're going to give it to whoever else. And we're just going to keep making TV ads because that's what we know how to do. And that is where the money is. And I think that's what happened. I experienced it. You know, we had big agencies that were like, hey, our client wants to do social. We don't want to do it. Can we outsource it to you guys? We're like, yeah. You know, and now we compete against them. And they're like, we're so good at social. I'm like, no, you guys sucked at social then and you still suck at social.
That's such an I've never thought of that before. And I think you're right. That's probably what happened. But it's interesting that that's never happened before. And the other thing that was interesting that you just said there was there's not a lot of money in it from the agency perspective, right? And you could see because what performs better on social is generally you don't have to do a big movie. You don't have to have all the cameras and equipment. And in a way, sometimes the higher the quality, the worse the post does. So how do you then make money doing it?
What's a different model? You know, I mean, the TV model, you could have, you know, get paid $1 million to create an ad and have, you know, 40 people working on it and you build a whole model around that. You know, one piece of content, $1 million. That, you know, that doesn't work obviously for social. And so you build a different type of team. And so, you know, I think one of the problems of traditional is like they try to apply a traditional approach, a traditional staffing approach, a traditional budget approach to social. And then you wind up with things that look like ads on social that nobody cares about, that were probably expensive to make. Instead, you know, we start from more like the ground up model. We say, you know, what is great social media content? It's oftentimes it's shot on an iPhone. Oftentimes it's much more scrappy. Oftentimes it's, you know, behind the scenes or, you know, reacting to a trend or whatever it is. And let's build teams of people that really understand how to do that and can create high quality social media content quickly and efficiently so that we can test lots of things and quickly get to what works and then create more and more of that. And it's a totally different model. And we have, you know, 16 years of experience now figuring out how do you build that model that works for now an enterprise level company where, you know, there is money in social media now. It's just that, you know, if a company is going to pay you $1 million, it's not to create one piece of content, it's to create 1,000 pieces of content. And so you have to build the machine that can do that.
How everything that you're saying is just so fascinating in the level that it seems so obvious. It makes people almost want to kick themselves in the butt. That there's like, yeah, obviously this is the way to do it. Why? So then, and then probably what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to hear it and then they're not going to do it. Why?
I think the change is really hard for companies. I think that, and for people as well. And it's especially like if you spent, 20 years of a career building up to this idea of the pinnacle of my career is creating a Super Bowl ad. And then all of a sudden, all of the air gets sucked out of that. That's really hard for people to just say like, okay, cool. Yep. Now I'm going to totally pivot and I'm going to figure out how to, create content on my phone and, get on social and understand like these memes and trends. Like that is so hard to do. And so I think people don't do it. I think that change is really hard for companies and people. We are fortunate because we were born in the social media era and that world changes constantly. And so our culture is about reacting to change. So we continually reinvent who we are as an agency in terms of what it is that we create for our clients because, it changes so much. Like our power and strength is in our ability to be adaptable because that's what it takes to operate really efficiently today. But that DNA doesn't exist at a lot of, more traditional older agencies because, TV ads were TV ads for a long time. So understanding going through that change is really challenging. And I think it's easier to build it from the ground up. And we were fortunate that we built it from the ground up at the right time and totally kind of caught this wave of social media and have grown with it.
I want to ask you, I feel like I'd be remiss to not about, personal branding and LinkedIn. I see you're extremely active. You're posting several times a week on LinkedIn. As we would say, building your personal brand. How do you apply all these social media ideas we've been talking about? We've been talking about them in the context of companies, but applying them to both as an individual, as a company founder, and I guess as a service-based company, as opposed to a product-based company. How do you use social media, I guess, to grow yourself and your agency and the LinkedIn, the professional services is very different than, let's say, trying to grow, a cosmetic company or something along those lines.
Well, I actually think that what we're going to see is more and more and more and more and more founders and CEOs being incredibly active on social because the reality is most often it's more interesting to follow a person than a brand. And those individuals are, the person behind the brand. Obviously there's everyone, but they're the executives in charge. And so I think that we're going to see a trend, and you see really successful CEOs doing it and founders doing it. And it's, very successful in terms of driving growth of their business. And it's both more traditional CEOs that are doing it or people who are themselves influencers starting companies and becoming CEOs. Both are working. And so I think that more and more people are going to see it that it's working and do it. And I actually was not as active on social media for a while as I definitely should have been, but I decided like, what, I'm going to start to be more active. This is incredibly important. And I see, we win business all the time because people see my LinkedIn posts and they reach out and they say, I saw what you had to say. I think that applies to my brand. Do you think that we'd be a good fit? And when we are, we start working together. So I think we'll see it, increasingly. And then the other thing is like people who are starting companies today are lots of different ages, right? But I am 39, I'm going to turn 40, and there's probably a lot of people my age or younger who are starting companies. And I've been on social media since college. And, if you're younger than me, you've been on social media your entire life. And so for a long time, we did stuff where we were like training CEOs and CMOs to how to use social media. Today, the people that are starting companies, like they've been on it since they were kids. And so it's natural to them. And so they're like, why wouldn't I be posting about what I'm doing? I have been my whole life. I'm going to continue doing it.
So what advice would you give to a company founder or an executive who kind of wants to get started with this, but they're afraid of being overly promotional, boring, cringy, whatever you want to call it? Like, how do you approach this in a way that feels authentic and I guess adds value to the conversation that's going on?
They should hire Genius Scouts. And
obviously,
tell them what to do. I mean, it's cliche, but get started, right? Like just start posting and you'll quickly learn what's working. And I think truly, I do think partnering with, folks like you that know what you're doing and can help them, head in the right direction is incredibly valuable. And so I think it's, if they're younger, they're probably already comfortable. They're probably already doing it. So we're probably talking about, older entrepreneurs. And I think, if they want to grow their business and they see this as a way of doing it, then I think they just need to get started.
Do you think it's true that younger people who grew up with the internet, I mean, I kind of started in high school, I'm a drop older than you, they're consumers of social media, but I guess my instinct would be to say that most of them still aren't creators themselves. What do you think about that?
I think it
Like they're
depends.
still not comfortable being on camera. They're still not comfortable posting in many cases. They just like to consume.
I think that, I don't know how old you are, but like we're kind of on the bubble as like millennials. But when
Mhm.
you start to go to younger generations, I don't think that's really true. I think that they are incredibly comfortable being, because even if they didn't have a big social media account, they were sending their friends Snapchats all the time. You
Mhm.
know, they are comfortable. I mean, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a baby, and they are FaceTiming all the time, right? So they are like already in front of the camera. They are creating videos of themselves. They're sending it to Grammy. They're sending it to Zadie.
Yeah.
They already at that age, there are synapses firing in their brain that are getting them to understand how to do this stuff. And it's
Yeah.
only going to increase. So I think that it it's gonna change the dynamic for them. Like I'm actually really excited about it because I think that so much marketing sucks and social media is forcing people to create better, more interesting content. And so I think that brands will just naturally be more interesting as we have the next generation sort of rising up into, leadership roles or starting companies themselves.
You think maybe the next creative revolution will come from the audience?
I think it already is. I mean, look at social media today, right? Social media today is not powered by big media companies. It's powered by individuals who have created a platform from themselves. So, you know, social media dwarfs traditional media in terms of how much people are consuming, right? Like the biggest streaming platform in the world is not Netflix, it's YouTube.
Mhm.
YouTube is all creators.
Mhm.
So I think it has happened. I think we're living in it right now.
What I love most about this conversation, by the way, and we have to wrap it up, and we're just going to have you on again to go into to more specific things. But what I really love is that not once has anyone mentioned AI, and I think that that's just amazing. I
So
think,
you had to bring it up at the end here.
well, I had to bring it up at the end. We don't want to be like, well, but that's why we're going to maybe have to have Jason on again, because I know that every once in a while Jason says something about AI. But again, I'm also fascinated with the fact that Jason every once in a while talks about AI. But obviously, AI is affecting um, is affecting social media in good ways, in bad ways, probably enabling people to be more creative than ever before and making it easier for anybody to do things, but also flooding the system with a lot of banal crap, right? Um, and I don't necessarily want you to answer a question about AI because I don't want to necessarily start a whole conversation. Um, but the reason why I bring it up is because um, well, let me be polite. Is there anything you want to say about that, really quick?
I feel like you don't want me to. I feel like you want to make a point that I'm not gonna. But
I just
I
found it interesting. Like we're talking about people, and social media is about social. It's about people interacting with people, and to me, that's the important thing.
yeah, I agree. I think that what I'm interested in, I think that tools have made it easier for people to be creative. They've brought down the barriers of for people to do that. Like we're talking about right now, does it require a big studio selecting somebody to be a star? Somebody can decide themselves to be a star. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of pros and cons of what's happening with AI and the technology, but I think one of the exciting pieces is it will continue to lower the barriers. And so people who are just really creative and interesting will have an even easier time, getting a message out there.
Well, Jason, before we wrap up, we've got a quick rapid fire round for you. And the reason why I bring up AI at the end is because these questions were generated by an AI agent trained by on the AI on the style and perspective of Howard Gossage, who is, as you know, one of my favorite ad guys and a huge inspiration for Genius Scout. So, at any chance we get to bring his spirit into the podcast, we try to do it. So, just answer Howard's questions with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Most underrated social media platform right now?
Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit. What will change about social media in the next 10 years?
The way in which the UI is structured.
What won't change about social media in the next 10 years?
That it will both be really helpful to connect people and also devastating in lots of ways culturally.
One social media trend you wish would disappear?
Brands feeling like they have to jump into the comment section of every viral post.
First app to check this morning?
Apple News.
But first, first social media app or platform you checked this morning?
Either LinkedIn or TikTok.
If movement strategy had a mascot, what would it be?
Tuna.
Why?
Because somebody smart that helped us with our branding designed a tuna for us, and it always stuck with me.
Yeah, tunas never stop moving. Otherwise, they'll drown. Believe it or not, fish can drown. Worst social media advice you've ever heard?
Okay, I'm going to flip this one. This is the best and worst social advice. Don't do social for social's sake. I can unpack it, but it's not a quick fire.
No, I think it's better. Let that be like a Zen koan. That is the best and worst advice you've ever heard. That's great. Okay, biggest oh crap moment in your career and how you fixed it.
We've had points in our career where we have had large clients approach us and sign up for work, and it was, a bit beyond the scale and scope of what we've done before, and we've had to really quickly, hire and find the right people and processes to deliver for those clients. But I think that's the challenge of being an entrepreneur, a business owner. And luckily we've solved them and have, formed really great long-term relationships with huge brands during the process.
If you could take over one brand's social media for a day, which one would it be?
The White House.
Okay.
Good answer.
It's a good answer. If you had to describe your leadership style in a movie, what movie would it be?
The Godfather. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Dude, where's my car?
Dude, where's my car? That is, yeah, I could see that. Okay. And last question, your personal brand and a hashtag. Not that anyone uses hashtags anymore.
Follow Friday. Throwback Church. I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Jason, this has been an incredible conversation. Your journey from the skiing to scrolling is and marketing is truly inspiring. Where can people go to learn more about both Movement and you?
Yeah, I'm movementstrategy.com. And then I think the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, Jason Mitchell, Movement. And I will connect.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes. And if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.